Right, hello everyone. We're now live for the social agency hangout with Bill Boorman and myself, hosted by colleague. We're discussing a white paper which we put together, or rather Bill put together recently, based around transaction the from transaction to relationship recruiting is the title, the agency opportunity. Sorry for the late start. We had a few ghosts in the machine.
Yeah,
We're here now after some sound problems. Bill, do you want to introduce the paper and what the theme's about?
yeah.
Give us.
I think it's really just tied around the changing nature of the agency market for recruiters. I think it's very easy to think everything's doom and gloom at the moment when you look at most of what's been talked about, whether that's people moving over to direct sourcing models or how easy it is for candidates to connect with clients. So we look at the whole background to that, and then look at actually what the opportunity is now to move from that transactional, here's a CV, here's a candidate, have a look at them, into much more of a relationship both with candidates and clients, and what agency recruiters need to be thinking about doing right now, and what agency owners need to be thinking about in terms of change of policy.
Right. Okay. So, I gave it a read through, and there's an element of a bit of a history lesson to start with, and then it goes on to what recruiters might be able to do to take it back to a relationship-based recruiting standard that, I mean, did you believe there used to be that kind of recruiting going before the internet?
Before the internet, we look at technology. There's a lot of things in technology that's made our lives a lot easier, made recruiting a lot easier. But two things it's done is it's made relationships a lot more shallow in terms of how well we're connected with people. And we've ended up in a market where reward is for speed rather than quality, in terms of hiring. And there's been a kind of whole gradual evolution of that from the change to email and how people communicate in that respect to recruiting was always very local. So you went into your local agency, you had an interview, you sat down with your recruiter, you talked to them. And all of that's really died away and been replaced by the fact that with the advent of job boards and CV databases, it really became first one to the CV database won the race, and there was no time for really quality interviews or anything else. And as the internet really meant that recruiting spread geographically, so when I was involved in recruiting, when Primetime first opened there, and with 6 branches deliberately to have a hub, because permanent candidates in the sales recruitment market wouldn't travel more than probably 75 miles to come for an interview, and they needed to, and it needed to be face to face. And if you're in the next town, a company wouldn't work with you, a hiring company, because they wanted it local. So business was local and face to face and on the telephone, and really, and volumes were much smaller because you didn't have this great access to multitudes of candidates coming through the door. You didn't have LinkedIn or anywhere like that where you could go to and connect with so many people. So it really was built on relationship, which had certain values, and which has really eroded over time with the advent of the internet.
Yeah. So the internet's come along. Is it just the internet? Is technology causing this then?
I think it's all of technology, really. So it's everything from the internet to internet, email, to people's attitudes as well, in terms of what's acceptable, what candidates want, what candidates look on agencies as, in terms of how they do business. And I think a lot of hiring companies get the agencies they deserve, because they've looked to push margins down, look to do everything for cheaper, and not been very good at saying actually how's that going to compromise the service. So they want it cheaper and quicker.
So it's not just agencies at fault then.
No, no. I actually think the agent from an agency point of view, it's very easy for agency recruiters to feel under siege and get bashed quite a lot. But they really have been the agency recruiters and consultants have been pushed further and further away from hiring managers, and the further they get from hiring managers, the more barriers there are put in place. The more, how can you really understand a vacancy when what you're doing is dealing with a job portal tied into an SLA, and you're submitting a CV and hoping you're the first of 20 agencies to do that? How can you really have a relationship on that basis? You can't.
So it's become fairly an automated system almost. I mean,
automated and totally transactional.
Yeah.
So it's been totally about no real relationship with the candidate, no real relationship with the client, and push the CVs out. I hope that something sticks, because there's not been the time to get to know the hiring managers right, to understand what the hiring is all about, or to get to know the candidates properly, because interviews are really email CVs and a few notes scribbled on.
You talk about time and margin pressures. I guess you covered that. That's coming from hiring managers. The internet has pushed time and margins and made things faster.
Yeah, and job portals, everything else you look at. So if you're involved, and anyone listening in will recognise this, if you're involved in an agency auction, or one of the job escrows where the job is put up and goes to the lowest bidder. It goes to the lowest bidder, not necessarily the most capable to supply. So all of these technologies and all of these implementations just really drove more and more walls between recruiter and candidate and client.
So have you seen any recruiters reacting to this to try and differentiate themselves? I mean, you go on to talk about good recruitment practice and how recruiters can change and move towards a relationship.
Yeah, there are some examples, right? There's pockets of good practice that you'll witness from different agencies and different individual recruiters. So it's wrong to say that the industry as a whole is wrong, but what we're seeing is increasingly what's happening. If we look at it, more and more companies are saying, actually, we need to move to a direct hiring model. That's driven firstly by price, because you can reduce the cost of hire when you're hiring directly, and most of the people working in-house worked in agencies anyway, so they're actually just bringing agency practice in-house and doing it cheaper. You're then looking at the fact that the impact of employer brand and employer branding and opportunities that are presented there really for companies are saying the best people who can tell our story is ourselves. But probably the biggest area, if you talk to a lot of the companies, and I've just been involved in judging the UK version of the Candy Awards, and looking at the companies who have been awarded or are being looked at to be awarded distinction for good candidate experience. And the overriding thing that's coming out of that, in terms of the candies, is that the overriding practice that we're seeing is that actually for the candies, it's companies are bringing recruiting in-house because they give a better candidate experience. And I think that's another big factor, that there's more concern about candidate experience, and there's a feeling that the more layers you put in the recruitment process, and I can understand why that is, the less, the worsening of the candidate experience.
Well, is there not an opportunity then for recruiters to? I mean, our customers are mainly in the niche sector, and they seem to be they're continuing to do well and to maintain a very good reputation with their clients and candidates.
Well, I think
they have some focus.
Yeah, I think that's really the first thing. Is where's recruiting going? And historically, recruiting has been for the masses. It's been built around a mass market. Although there are niche practitioners, and what we've seen is that as more and more companies have gone direct, they're not saying, look, we won't use agencies. They're just saying we won't use agencies as much. So whereas they might have applied an 80-20 rule, the 80% used to be 80% of our hiring will be from agency, and that will be for our bulk stuff. The majority of the hiring we do, 20% will be in the niche. That will be the specialist stuff, and we'll do that ourselves. They've actually recognised that really they're better off saying the amount of time we're spending on the 20%, let's go to some specialists there. Let's find out who's got relationships and say we want to use agencies, but we want to use agencies who can present us with different candidates, people we can't find ourselves, people who have established relationships so they can influence decisions and choices that candidates make. And that's really where the opportunity is there for the niche recruiter to say, we want to change our focus, be much more candidate focused, have much closer relationships with our candidates, understand what's going on, and be more demanding of our clients.
Right. And just moving on to a bit I've got in front of me here, you talk about reward models. Are they to blame? I mean, you talk about contingency rewarding the transactional model.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think when you have a no win, no fee, when you have a situation, you kind of get the no win, no fee mentality, which is, if we can do a deal, we will do. You have to look at it, and actually, when we talk about what's charged and what's paid by hiring companies, totally the reward is based on introduction of CVs, introduction of candidates, not in long-term relationships. If I place someone with you who stays for 6 months, or someone who stays with you for 3 years, I get exactly the same reward, and yet you're getting better value every year. And I think that's something we have to look at. I think equally from an agency point of view, if you're brave enough to stick your neck out there and say, you know what, we're going to charge a fee every year. We're going to build our business on a retention model, and charging much lower introductory fees, much lower fees for introducing candidates. But if they stay with you, we're going to be earning off them all the time. It's a much better emphasis and way of doing business for everyone.
So you think that will encourage then a relationship? Obviously, it will encourage a relationship base because they've got the time to engage.
You've got time, but you're also being rewarded at the end of the day. You're being rewarded for better matches, for people staying longer. You're not being rewarded for introducing people. And
do you think recruiters will actually go for that model? I mean, you talk about RPO as being a good basis for third-party agencies.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But do I think agencies will go for it? I think there's a lot of people who need a new pair of pants if you talk about that kind of model. Because any kind of change is scary, and there'll be 101 reasons presented as to, there's too much out of our control. It's all down to the management of the company and so on. At the end of the day, isn't that good matching to make sure you get the right candidates for the right organisation? So I think some will be brave enough to look at it and also look at their whole model and look at the risk and reward model. In terms of RPO, I'm seeing increasingly more companies are looking and saying, well, okay, if we're not ready to go for direct hiring, we'll go for an RPO agreement. We'll bring in a supplier. We'll bring somebody in who can do this recruiting, but they'll just represent us, and they'll be measured over retention and measured over different things to how we measure our agencies. So I think what we're seeing right now is the RPO market is growing when the agency market is shrinking. So I think that's a serious area that, in terms of the RPO model, that all recruiters should be looking at in one form or another.
So are you talking about recruiters taking on responsibilities like employer brand and things like that?
Total service.
Yeah.
So employer brand, recruitment process, candidate experience, how the company is represented, how candidates are dealt with, building talent networks, building talent pipelines over longer periods of time, engagement with potential candidates, talent attraction, which doesn't mean just advertising on job boards. You know, I think it's the whole relationship. I think the other opportunity that I wrote about this week, I was in Atlanta last week at SourceCon, is actually being able to do a lot more in terms of collecting data on what's actually happening in the market, talent mapping and so on, and being able to work a lot closer with hiring companies on driving company strategy over where they should be looking, what they should be thinking about based on availability of talent.
So they should be acting more, well, perhaps some might want to be acting more in a consultancy manner on employment.
Yeah, but isn't that what recruitment consultants do? You know, isn't that the consultant bit, bit in the job title? And we've changed that. We've gone to always talking about recruiters. You know, we always talked about being recruitment consultants, which meant consulting on recruiting practice. It meant consulting on jobs and everything else. Now, you can only consult on changing job specs, on changing places where people are sourcing or the way in which they're sourcing, the things in which they're doing, if you've got data. In God we trust, everyone else bring data. And actually, recruitment consultants are in the perfect position to collect data and have reasoned discussions on the market and actually be an information source to when somebody comes to hiring. They need to be able to come to you and say, look, we want some new ideas. We don't want you just to show us what we can do ourselves. Don't show us that model. We can do that. We can put ads on job boards. We can go to CV databases. We can go to LinkedIn. Tell us something new. Tell us something we don't know. Tell us about what's really happening in the market. Because if you can educate us in that way, then you're actually giving us value, which I believe is the new value proposition.
So information, focus on what your niche is, advice in that area, and I guess using data to provide intelligence as well.
Yeah, data to provide intelligence and argument and inform your sector. You know, be a real leader in that market rather than a supplier to that market. In that you're the people who know what you're talking about. You could charge a premium for that. You can charge a premium for that service, and you don't necessarily need to charge a premium for the introduction of CVs.
So you go on to talk about building personal branding of recruiters.
Yeah.
And the idea of recruiters as individually being allowed to let go to network and build relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty vital to your ideas in this white paper, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, your network is going to be your net worth, because that's how far you're connected. That's how many people you're speaking to. That's where you're going to be able to offer advice. That's where you're collecting data. That's how you know what's going on in the market. One of the big things we got back from candidates, we conducted quite a lot of research with candidates and hiring companies in conducting the paper. It wasn't kind of a stick your finger in the air and see what happens. And the big things we were coming back was, okay, number one, specialist knowledge of a niche, understanding of the marketplace. You know, these were the top two areas that were scoring in the research. And I think when you're getting that only comes from actually being able to spend time researching and understanding your market. And it's very easy to do that now with all the feeds and the blogs and the connections, people you can talk to, conversations you can join in. But it would be considered to be non-sales time.
Yeah.
You know, so I think very much development and learning needs to be continuous, and it needs to go to being social learning rather than. I've worked with companies that would have absolutely no problem spending £3,000 or £4,000 on a course, but wouldn't allow a recruiter 20 minutes, half an hour a day to go and have a look at their market.
Well, in order to learn, you have to take part, don't you? In the social media sphere. So.
and being in the conversations, understanding how it's going, and just checking in on the network, seeing how people are doing, what they're up to. And I think the more you can build your presence in that market through your personal brand to both candidates and clients, the more successful you're going to be when it comes down to hiring, and the more credibility you have.
And other areas of candidate feedback we received? I'm looking at a list here. You were talking about prompt feedback, regular updates, so communication.
Prompt feedback is a massive one. You know, when you talk to candidates and candidate experience, one of the things you get is the recruiter found me on LinkedIn. They came to me. They were all over me. They were talking to me about this job. I was really excited about the opportunity. I sent my CV in. It was all a matter of great urgency, and then nothing. I hear nothing. People going for interviews and saying, went for interviews, black hole of feedback and contact. I think there's two reasons for that. I think part of that is people just focusing on the deals they're doing at the moment rather than
not nurturing.
Yeah, not nurturing. Not being necessarily being trained in delivering what might be perceived as bad news in a feedback way. I also think massively is this breakdown in relationship between client, hiring manager and recruiter over things like actually having something to say. I mean, the big thing I get back if you talk to recruiters is, we get the opportunity, we send the CV down, we brief the candidate, we do all our part right, and then nothing back. And that's because equally the relationship is not there with the hiring company.
So they're praying and spraying clients as well as candidates. Some people.
Yeah, but then I also think the client is doing exactly the same thing. You know, because there's not the relationship. You're using multiple suppliers. Equally, the hiring companies invest less time in the process.
So there's no loyalty or trust as a result, then.
Yeah, well, there's no relationship. There's no relationship where you can go back to people and say, well, look, you know, establishing service level agreements with your clients. We're saying, yeah, I'll deal with you, but if I send you CVs, you need to come back to me within 48 hours, and you need to give me more than a no, because I can't get better at what I'm doing. There's a massive acceptance that the check signer's word is law, and we always do what the check signers say.
And you don't agree with that, obviously.
No. You know, I think at the end of the day, probably for me, it comes back to this establishing and thinking about who the client is. I think hiring companies are quite easy to find. I think candidates aren't. You know, we talk about war for talent and talent shortage and all that kind of thing. Yeah. In terms of hireable talent, there is a shortage. It is about a relationship. It is established over a long period of time. And if clients don't give you the kind of feedback and work with you in the right way, then as recruiters, we should be regularly looking at sacking clients.
Okay.
But actually, we're a lot quicker to sack the candidates.
That's an interesting point, yeah.
Well, who makes you the money in the relationship, you know? I think it's very easy to think the person who signs the check is the client.
But the good candidate's the service. The candidate has to be decent, so...
all candidates are decent, you know. All candidates are decent. You just have to find the right companies.
Right.
You don't have the wrong candidates, Lou. You have the wrong jobs.
Right. Okay.
Because you have the candidates you have.
Is that a phrase in the white paper?
That's well, it's not in the white paper, but it's something that I talk about quite a lot.
Maybe the next one.
Yeah, and in my time with recruiters, it's always been the same thing, which is actually, and it's a common thing I've had. Well, Bill, we haven't got the right candidates for our jobs. You say, well, actually, have we not got the right candidates for our jobs, or have we not got the right jobs for our candidates? And relationship recruiting used to be about getting jobs for people, not people for jobs. And I think that's been the fundamental change. Now every job is a new transaction. people are running their database in a way that there's not information retrieval. It's not being run as a CRM for candidate and client relationship management. There's no real detail or data or intelligence being collected on that relationship. It's really just storage of a few conversations about where people went on holiday and when they're going to be hired next and who's being miserable today. There's no collection of real valuable information and revisiting it and trying to actually build business around that based on those relationships.
So well, that's something we've been talking about, isn't it? It's moving the CRM towards relationship management. Well, moving the database towards relationship management rather than just storing information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the things we have to really look at is, information retrieval. Are we running our systems for information storage or information retrieval? And if it's information storage, what happens? Every time you get a job, rinse and repeat. Start get a new set of candidates, shove them in the database, have 1 million contacts in your database, maintain no real relationship with them in terms of updates or where they're at or what's happening with them or what's happening with the clients, and you just get lost in that whole process.
It becomes very robotic.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Transactional, perhaps. So you go on near the end to talk about this new value proposition. About influence replacing control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And offering ongoing advice you've already mentioned, and you then start to talk about a few tools and areas like mobile and data, which you've just mentioned, social media, video interviewing. Can you go through a bit of what your sort of your solution is, so to speak?
Well, if we talk around mobile, let's forget about the technology because that's a whole different hangout. Let's talk about mobility and what that means. So this is when people are actually wanting to communicate. Few important bits of information. 75% of emails are opened on a mobile device now. You're talking about candidates. You're talking about the golden hours of web access on mobile being between about 6:20 in the morning and about 9:10, and then again quick break in the mid morning, and then the lunchtime, and then from about 4:30 to about 9:45. So you're talking about people wanting to communicate live, wanting to be able to talk live, respond to things, get updates, get their questions answered in any of the channels or even on emails. And then looking for, because even email has become almost instant messaging now. It's not uncommon to exchange very short 2 or 3 line emails with people and exchange 9 or 10 emails from mobile devices, right?
You don't even get a hello now. So.
Yeah, exactly. So mobility changes the times and the way in which people want to respond. And if you're not geared up for mobile, and if you're not looking at things like the hours that you're working to do that, and the technology you're putting in place, and making sure that you have a total mobile experience, then you're not really you're gonna miss out in terms of in the way in which candidates want to recruit and want to talk to people. It's kind of like having a phone without a headset. It can ring but no one can reply.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't do that. So mobility is an important part of that, and data, actually using data to recognise trends, see what's happening in markets, to analyse what's happening, and collect real-time data.
Which then that links into social media and mobile.
Exactly right. I think with all the tools and technology we've got now, and you've come out with a pretty neat one, which I know you're launching fairly soon. There's all kinds of tools everywhere. I'm looking at 9 or 10 applications every day, and finding has never been easier. But because finding is easy, recruiting is harder, because more people are trying to fish from the same pond.
I mean, you mentioned the tool that tool, that Internet Explorer add-in we're doing, and I don't mean to plug it inappropriately, but it's you source and then you take the data back, and is that not part of the transactional side of things? And then we need to start looking at
it's not
the
about
relationship side as well.
Yeah, but it's not about the collecting the data, right? It's what you do with the data. Yep. So it's how do you analyze it and how do you work with people based on what the story the data tells you. So it's very easy to collect data and leave that as a static file. What it means is every time I have a conversation with you, I'm looking to look at what's changed, what's going on in your world, how is your world changing. There's lots of ways I can do that, so that actually any information should actually be an ongoing record, an ongoing dialogue, rather than a collection of the same data points.
And we should be looking at live data. You were talking about
real time. Real time. You know, if you give me a CV last week, it's out of date. Something's changed, and there's so many aspects where we don't search historically. So if I give you an example, if we're looking for C++ programmers, you'll still put in the database that you want to look for C++ programmers with 3 years experience. You won't allow for the fact that a C++ programmer with 1 year's experience sent you their CV 2 years ago, and they sat in the database. So it's being dynamic about that and going back to people constantly and spending time getting to know what's changing, what's gone on, what have they done that's different, have their expectations changed, they're looking for something different, can we match them in different ways?
And this comes back to a point in your a point in the white paper about data being public now, data not being owned, which I know you've repeatedly said when in our discussions about the non-ownership of data, and linking to the what we discussed in other social agency hangouts, candidate experience and social media, about recruiters perhaps, or the managers letting their hair down a bit and letting recruiters...
It's owners letting their hair down a bit, but also you have to remember the value of an agency was always in the data and in the secure data that was locked down behind a firewall, that was in a filing cabinet, it wasn't accessible to anybody else. That's always been the case. So if you wanted to do evaluation of a recruitment business, and I've been involved in buying a few over the years, you would look at the relationships they've got, the data that they own in their database, and you'd work out a valuation based on that. Now, data has no value because it's freely available. Anyone can go and mine it in any source. What's important is how you interpret and what you do with that data. That's where the value is. How do you interpret it? How do you use it? And how do you use it to build relationships? So the value that you've got is, where are the real relationships that you have? Who's in your inner circle? That's where your value is.
And technology can help with that. Ultimately.
Yeah, and I think for agency owners, it's a massive challenge, because they still get this whole thing. Oh, we recognise that we need to let people build their own LinkedIn accounts and networks, but we're really frightened that they're going to leave and they're going to steal all our contacts and all that kind of stuff, you know. It's a big fear, so we won't get involved in that kind of social world because driven by fear. I think they've got to let it down and say, you know what, we can't own any relationships. We've got to be really open about this. What we've got to do is we've got to concentrate on the relationships that we have with those people.
Okay. I think we've covered it. I hope people still want to download it, Bill.
Yeah, yeah.
We've covered quite a bit. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Quickly at the end, you mentioned changing world of work, the shift towards contingency.
Yeah, I think there's a real big challenge coming for agencies, and I think that the agency world hasn't yet felt the full impact of this sourcing technology and direct sourcing model. And I think certainly a lot of the agencies that I talk to are being propped up by their contract margins and contract projects. But we're seeing more sites like 3Desk and other similar sites which are connecting contractors direct with hiring organisations. And although hiring organisations are saying, yeah, we don't want to get involved in the payroll, well, there's all these umbrella companies who are really quick to jump in and say, well, we'll do that. So actually, you don't need to pay the agency margin anymore. So that means there's going to be contractor pressure. I think the other change which is coming is, big time, is work's changing. And work's changing from being full-time to contingent. So more and more people will be working on contracts. They'll be working on shorter periods of time. They'll be excited by different things. And actually relationships of where they go and who's got the skill is going to be at a real premium. So it's a real time to start having a real close look at the relationships you've got with your candidates and your contractors, and how you develop that and how you maintain contact and relationship with people when they're not working for you and they're going in and out of work. I also think the opportunity for agencies to provide things like development and good quality training, which won't be there the more people move out of full-time work into part-time work, the way in which you can reward them with things like, I've been working with RollPoint on a referral product partly for agencies, and one of the things we're looking at is actually we won't reward people with cash, we'll reward them with development points, because that's going to disappear from the market. So the whole market's changing in that respect.
That's an interesting idea, that last one. Might look at that internally.
Yeah, it's not a difficult thing when you talk about, well, how do we run a contractor referral program? What would they really value? Actually, you could have a win-win, because you can provide development points for their referrals, so you're getting more contractors into the bank of what you're doing, and working with you. And not only are you doing that, you're actually, if you're using data properly, you can start benchmarking. So you can start saying, right, this is where the market's going. These are the skills you're going to need. These are the skills you've got right now. Here's the gap. This is how you can earn it, and we'll be the people to provide that.
And that's all part of building this specialist identity, this niche focus, and this building that reputation for your networks.
Networks are whether you're offering your network what they need or what you think they want.
So I think we'll wrap it up. Is there anything more you want to add?
No,
Bill?
I think that's it. Other than saying, come and see us at the Recruitment Agency Expo. I'll be on the stand. Come and get a copy of the white paper. Come and get a copy of the white paper. But and I'll be on the stand for anyone who wants to come and talk about or argue or disagree about this stuff.
Yes. Any feedback either at the expo, or you can tweet at colleague RS or Bill at Bill Boorman. Or use the hashtag social agency. We're on Google, we're on every single channel. So it'll be interesting to see if you've upset anyone, Bill, or if anyone...
I certainly hope so.
Or if people are generally agreeing, actually. So yeah, and you can get the white paper on our website now, actually. You can download it. Just go into the recruitment goodies bit. It's a new bit where basically curating lots of tools, free white papers, blog links, event tickets hopefully down the line, anything just agency focused. But obviously we're at the Recruitment Agency Expo, stand 112, and Bill will be there most of the day for a chat, social recruiting side, but anything really, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'll be the one in a hat.
Yeah. Which one?
I will wait and see.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, Bill, then. We'll wrap that up. I'll see everyone next time.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.